You
Well,
randomly saw her there,
I think we knew she was there. We met up for like dinner and stuff like that.
but it wasn't like she went with you.
No, she lived abroad. That was like
Ah,
my key. So my friend was like, "I'm going to Dubai for Thanksgiving." I said, "Oh, if you told me, I would have went with you." She said the tickets are still so and so. So I invited myself on her trip, linked up with
there's
our,
still room on the plane. Like,
you
don't
know what
play
I'm
yourself.
saying? I was like, "Oh, for real? You down for me to come with you?" I didn't know what she was going for. So I was like, "Great. All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Abby here, and I have a very special guest named Greene. He's doing some wonderful things on the interwebs. So, we had to get him on here just to share more information about himself and the things that he's doing. Welcome, D.
What's going on?
Nothing much, nothing much. So, D, please. I have only pretty much seen or met you via Instagram. So I'd love to get to know more about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Indiana in the U.S. And I've been traveling like the past 2 years. So I'm actually right now, and I'm in. Where are you actually? I'm in Hungary actually right now.
Oh, nice. I'm in Abu Dhabi, UAE.
Ah, okay, that's where you're from,
No, I'm from the US too.
or not where you're from. I don't think anyone, not most people are not from. Well, there's some people from out there, but there's a lot of people. Where are you from, like originally?
I'm from Georgia. Well, I was born in New Jersey, raised in Georgia.
Oh, okay. So I was living in Florida like the past like 6 or 7 years, and then I've been an entrepreneur since like 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still basically running my own companies out here and like traveling basically right now.
Oh, so that's I said you said some keywords out there. So first of all, you're from the US, which is great, and you've technically been traveling or you're an expat in different countries. So can you tell us more about let's start a little ways back, probably maybe what you went to school for, what you started with, and what sparked this interest in being an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneur abroad.
Yeah, I was going to school for kind of like graphic design in high school. So I was doing like Photoshop, video editing, stuff like that. And then when I went to college, I went to school for informatics and computer science. So I was really more kind of interested in the design side of things, but I feel like when I explained that to the counselor or whatever the position is called, I remember going in and I was like, these classes don't seem like anything like I told you, like what I was interested in. It's like it's not a requirement for them to update the courses and all this stuff. It just felt like I was in like really weird classes that was like more on like science than like the creativity. And I remember wanting to drop out, but my family's like, you have to have that piece of paper, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized like this is not really for me. Like this is not really what I'm trying to do. Like I want to be creative. I want to do my own thing. I'm not really trying to work for somebody else. So over time I ended up developing that. But the thing that I really wanted that made us want to, or yeah, made us really want to travel. Long story short, was we went on this cruise in 2018. That was like my first cruise ever. We went to the Bahamas. When we came back, I was like, man, I want to like go on like another trip. And I remember one of my friends telling me he used to go to like China and all these different places. And prior to that, I thought traveling was like super, super like expensive. I think a lot of maybe not so much now, but I think like before we had a lot of like travel vloggers and travel vlogs and stuff, I feel like people thought, especially I think from the US, that it was either super expensive and or super dangerous, like outside of the country. Like everywhere is like a third world country and it's like just not, it's like might as well just stay home, right? So I was looking into it and I'm like, man, it's really not that expensive to go to like a Paris or like a Italy or anything like that. It's not, it's like I feel like a lot of my friends thought it's like, oh, you gotta have like $10,000. I'm like, bro, it's like really not all that much. So we ended up going to Paris. And then a little bit after that, that same year, we ended up going to Italy. And during that time, I ended up getting into like travel vlogging and like actually like watching a ton of travel vlogs. And I was like, man, I really want to find a way to like do this one day. I don't know what the business side of things looks like and all that type of stuff, but I would love to just like use video content, travel, meet people, and do these things. And then when the pandemic hit, towards the end of 2020, there, I think it was Barbados. They had like a digital nomad visa. So we were looking into that. We're like, oh, okay, why don't we just do that? Like you can't really travel right now, but they have certain countries where you can go and you can stay for like a whole year. So we're looking into that. And as we were watching like YouTube videos about it, we were learning more about like digital nomads and like, oh, there's people out there that just go from like place to place. Like you don't just stay at one place and like get a year long lease or whatever. Like you can just like pick and choose like where you go. So Mexico at the time was really like one of the only places that was open that we had been. We're like, we don't want to just start off somewhere random, like if we don't like it, and then like we're gonna sell it because we're also like, we don't want to keep a place back home because that's going to be expensive. We're having to pay for both places. So like, why don't we sell our stuff, travel, but let's go somewhere that we know. So for our anniversary in November 2020, we went to Mexico and we really liked it. So the beginning of 2021, we ended up just selling our stuff, going to Mexico, and we basically stayed there for like 6 or 7 months, and then also in Colombia, and we've basically just been traveling ever since. So it was a mix of like experiencing Europe, experiencing other countries, watching other people do it, and then having the opportunity during the pandemic, and then just like going all in on it.
Oh, that's super dope. So, that's wonderful that you have a partner that you can that is on, cue with what you want to do and being able to be open. What does your partner do that they can also be a digital nomad with you?
Yeah, for the main thing is like she just helps me do what I'm doing better, right? So one thing I realized, to go a little bit farther into what I do. So we basically have like a private club, we call it, and inside of that private club we help other entrepreneurs, online coaches create video content that's going to get them clients, right? So we do like a whole bunch of stuff inside of there. And I realize like I'm more of like the creative person, and I'm more kind of like the people you're talking to on this podcast, where it's like, bro, let's just get stuff done, like no excuses. Like I'm gonna move to the UAE, I'm gonna move to what, like I'm gonna build this life that I desire. I'm all about inspiring people, but I hate to like baby people. It's like, are we going to do it or not? So that used to ruin my day, just talking to people that didn't have that mindset all the time. And so she's really good at being a little calmer with people, like on those type of conversations. I just feel like it was ruining my creativity side. So she handles a lot of like the customer support, the initial contact for people, a lot of the emails and stuff like that, which frees me up. And then she also homeschools our daughter, and then she works for like another, it's like a life insurance agent. She does some of the same stuff that she does for me for her.
And so that's super key as well, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand how many opportunities there are and that you don't have to go and clock in a place, that you can do it from different
Right.
places in the United States or different places around the world. So can you tell us how many countries that you currently visited or been to or lived in for like temporary?
Yeah, it's funny. We had like a birthday party yesterday for our daughter, and I was telling somebody this. They asked me this, and I was like, when 2021, so this is like in February, this is almost like 2 years ago now, right? Our plan was to go somewhere every single month. So February 2021, our plan was to go somewhere every single month. It's now almost 2 years later, and we've been to 3 countries. So it's like totally different than what we expected. So I've been to a little bit more because I went to some like myself for like conferences and whatnot. But we've been to Mexico, Colombia, and then now Hungary.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What has been your favorite place thus far?
Hungary.
Hungary. That's dope. I heard about Hungary. We had this thing called like the Expo. It was a big to do here a while ago, and they had different pavilions. And Hungary was an interesting pavilion. They also said there's lots of like hot springs and water situations there. That's like healing. Have you been to those places yet?
No, I haven't. I think to be fair, it's like Budapest, that's where I'm at right now, is not really Hungary. So it's like totally different. So I think it's like when people from outside of the US, I was talking to someone about this. When people outside of the US think of New York City, they think that's New York. But it's like New York is a state. Like there's other places, you know what I mean? So it's like to say New York City is New York is not quite accurate. Like that's a total different thing. So Budapest in itself is like the biggest city. It's a lot different. So I haven't really explored the rest of Hungary, and from my understanding, it's like really different. But the city of Budapest is like super amazing.
All right, so tell me how you and your wife have overcome like challenges, be it family challenges, saying why are you moving here, or why are you going there, or even starting up that business when it's not necessarily common for that business model to exist. So my assumption is that you live and work abroad, but where are your clients coming from? Are they mostly US based?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's the case right there. So you're abroad, but you're
yeah.
working with people mostly from the US.
Mainly, yep. Mhm.
Great, great, great. And how did your family take it? How did your family, or if your mom was already made up, what challenges did you face from moving outside of like selling your stuff and actually just like hopping on a plane?
Yeah, I think like for my wife's family was a little bit different, but for the people that knew me, like I've always just been like bro's doing what he wants to do. You know what I mean? Like that's how I got to where I was at. Like moving here, moving there, like quitting this job, doing this thing. So it was more like a like maybe a couple questions, but it's like they knew I was going to do what I wanted to do at the end of the day. Whereas her family is more of like, why do you guys want to do this type of thing? Like, how long are you going to be gone? Blah, blah, blah. But basically, I was like, this is something that if we're thinking about it, we have to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people have ideas, they get the opportunity, they're waiting for like the perfect moment, which just like doesn't really exist. And so I didn't wait for the perfect moment. I just waited for like the first opportunity, which I think is like a big key, right? So we knew our when our lease was up for the place we were at. So I just started looking for a place. And when I found one that I remotely liked, I just put money down on it. And then I just told her like we're going. Like I put some money. We had talked about it prior, but I was like, I'm putting some money like down. I did the research, I found the place. And we didn't know exactly how we were going to do it. We didn't have the plane ticket. We didn't have like a lot of stuff, but I'm like, I'm going to at least put money down towards something because we were like, do we really want to go to Mexico? Do we want to do this? And I'm like, if we extend our lease, like it's going to be like, I think like when people go to college, it's like, well, don't drop out because you're already in college. So then you graduate, and it's like, well, you have your piece of paper, so you might as well get a job in doing what you're doing, or you're gonna waste your money. And then after that, it's like, well, you already started working at this job. Why are you gonna quit? You might as well work another year or two. And then it's like, well, you've been here 2 years, you might as well work 10 years. And it's like, well, now that you worked here for 10 years, you can't be driving with that car, and then you can't live in this neighborhood, and then you got to be married, and now that you're married, you got like it just keeps piling on. So I'm like, if we do that, we're gonna look back 5 or 10 years from now and be like, dang, I wish we would have traveled. So I'm like, if we're like postponing, it's like, oh well, we might as well wait until next year. We might as well wait until this or this happens. So I'm like, we just have to go. So I remember I just found a place. I put down whatever the deposit was for like a month, and I was like, well, we'll go for a month and then see what happens. And then once we got there, we liked it and we extended it.
That's amazing right there. You don't, like I said, you don't find many stories like that. Even briefly for my story, mine was teaching abroad. And my excuse at the beginning was, "Oh, I don't want to go and teach English." Then I happened to travel to Dubai with a high school friend, met up with my teacher, who was my Spanish teacher in high school, and she said, "You need to come over here." She
Like
listed off,
randomly, you
well,
randomly saw her there,
I think we knew she was there. We met up for like dinner and stuff like that.
but it wasn't like she went with you.
No, she lived abroad. That was like
Ah,
my key. So my friend was like, "I'm going to Dubai for Thanksgiving." I said, "Oh, if you told me, I would have went with you." She said the tickets are still so and so. So I invited myself on her trip, linked up with
there's
our,
still room on the plane. Like,
you
don't
know what
play
I'm
yourself.
saying? I was like, "Oh, for real? You down for me to come with you?" I didn't know what she was going for. So I was like, "Great." So, met up with her for dinner. She told me, she was like, "Listen, you need to come over here." I was turning 30, right? Or had turned 30. And I was like, "Do I buy a house? I need something else drastic. Like, I'm not in a relationship. I don't have any kids. I need something else. Because just teaching consistently ain't doing it for me right now." So she was like, "You need to come over here." She told me a couple, she's like, "I bank, this much money a year. I'm able to travel all over the place. I feel super safe over here." I looked into it, and and I went, and 4 years later, people ask me when I'm coming back, and I'm like, if I don't have to come back, I won't. So
Wait. Say that one more time. People in the States are asking you, like, when you're, that's what you mean? Like, they're
yeah,
asking, like, when will you come?
they want to know when I'm returning to the States. And I said, if I don't have to, I will not.
Answer is never not. So the answer is maybe, but don't. Yeah, I'm like, I think, like, oh man, it's so interesting. Like, when you talk to people outside of the States, and you actually see it, it's like, when I went home, I've been back over the past 2 years, like 2 or 3 months. And then that's why I've been to a couple more countries. I told my wife, I was like, I got to get out of here. And I went to London and Istanbul for a bit. And then they met me up in Europe. But it's just people will say, like, they say two things. They're like, why do you want to travel when you already live in the best country, like ever, right? People always say that. And then when you're like, why do you think it's the best country or why do you live here? And they're like, well, I love America because of the freedom. And while I don't totally disagree with that, my question is the freedom to do what,
Mm,
right? The people that say this, I'm like, you wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast, you go to work, stay at work for 8 hours, you drive home, turn on the news, eat dinner, go to sleep, do the same thing. On the weekends, you relax, maybe go to the pool, have a barbecue, whatever. Sunday, either you go to church or you hang out and you do it all over. I'm like, do you know how many countries you can do that in? Like, what are you trying to do that's so drastic that you need all this freedom? Like, what are you doing? It's like, well, I want the freedom to say whatever I want. It's like, well, what are you saying that's gonna, like, you're not doing nothing. Like, you're not on Twitter saying anything. You don't have a podcast. You're not going, like, you're literally the most complacent human being that could exist in any other country. I think people, it's just so stupid when people say that, but I realize it's like they haven't been exposed to the same things we have, right? Like if they didn't watch the same travel vlogs I watched, they're not going to think the same. If they didn't go to the same countries, but I think if Americans were to open their mind, and I think being born in America is one of the best things. Like, because the passport is heavy,
Hmm.
the culture is different. Like we're exposed to a lot of things. But I think once you start making money, or you get to the point where you're looking for a place to like live long term, like living outside the US is like a cheat code, especially if you can make USD or like pounds outside of it. It's just like people don't like it's so safe here in Hungary that I will tell people like, all right, man, good night. Like, thanks for like hanging out or whatever. Like after dinner, I'll be like, all right, be safe. And they're like, for what? Like, what's about to happen? You know what I mean? Like in the States, that's just like a common thing to say. So it's just like I feel like we say things like, this is how black people are, this is how white people are, this is how this is, this is how that is. And I'm like, no, we need to start saying in America at the end, because it ain't like there's like
Mm.
200 in some other countries. Like stuff is not the same. You know, like I go to these other countries, like the racism is not the same. The way you're treated is not the same. The way people act is not the same. The hospitality is not the same. And there's so many like amazing places, amazing people. And I think it's unfortunate in the States that there's this message push that like everywhere else just sucks in the world, and it's like not as good. There's not good health care, dental care. There's not Wi-Fi. There's no skyscrapers outside of the US, and it's just like, bro, cut it out.
Have
you
you
know
had people come up to you and say, "Why are you here? America's so great. That's where I want to be."
Not a lot, not a lot. And one of the things I started at, like, I'm really like a big fan of like asking for understanding, right? Like I don't really get it. I try like my motto is like don't be sensitive, don't get offended, right?
Mm.
If somebody came up to me and was like, I hate black people, most black people I know, like that's gonna ruin their day, right? They're ready to fight this person, shoot this person, whatever, right? For me, it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, why do you say that? Maybe I'm not saying this is right, but maybe they have a good reason, right? Oh, well, when I was 2 years old, there was no black people in our whole city. And I looked outside, my mom was coming home, and there's a group of 10 black guys. They raped her and killed her. Like, but bro, like, yeah, you clearly that's going to give you a different perspective. But if you don't know that, you're just like, oh, this person hates black people for no reason. So one thing I like to ask people is, hey, in America, we have this perception that everyone is like dying to come over here. Like when you were little, growing up, and even now, is that like a number one desire? And like people are really saying like no, in Europe at least. It's not like I think we think like, yo, we're so good. Like people are willing to sell their kidneys to like come to the States, and it's like it's not really the case. So I think some people do ask, like they're curious, and then when I explain it, they get it. And I think now that there's more like social media, a lot of people are like, it's funny that we think countries are dangerous, but they think the US is dangerous because of all
Hmm.
like the gun. So I think people are more understanding of it. And I think another thing that sometimes locals don't get is that they're like, oh, the economy could be bad, and the politics could be bad. But like I was saying, if you're earning USD, you're not living the same. It's funny because I saw this guy post on TikTok the other day about this place in Colombia that he was living. He's like, man, this is the cheat code. Like, if you could like go half and half, like on Airbnb, or get like a group, is like this dope penthouse. And then I commented, I was like, living outside of the US is like a cheat code or a hack or something like that. I had like 1,000 likes or something like that. And then people are like, yeah, but if you move to Colombia, you're only going to be making like $100 a month. Like, you're not going to be able to do all this, blah, blah. And I'm like, bro, obviously you're not like, the goal is not to move there and work there. Like, but what I'm saying is if you are making USD and you move to Colombia, you're gonna have a totally different experience than the local people. Like if you're making, three, four, $5,000 a month and you're living somewhere where the average salary is 300, like it's a totally different thing. So I think when people understand that, like it starts to click in their mind. But I don't get that often, but that is like, I mean, I think some people are curious because they've never lived there, and they hear people talking about how good of a country it is. It's like, why would you leave to come to Hungary?
Mm. Well, can you tell us a bit more about how you run your business? I believe you said businesses, right? So for somebody who would be interested in taking on this particular model, right? So both of us are expats right now, living outside the country, owning US based businesses and being able to collect US money for US clients primarily. How did you kind of set up your your business situation so that you can have this model and live around the world. And as long as there's some decent Wi-Fi and power, then you're good to go.
I think the first thing that people have to understand is there's a difference in like the terminology. So like when we say expat and we even say digital nomad, that can be different. So for my knowledge, an expat more or less is somebody that's like, this is the place that I want to stay, and this is where I'm living, and they probably have like some type of residency. So maybe
So
like for
I'm
yourself,
an
right?
expat. I'm a resident of the UAE. So I'm a resident,
Right.
and I believe you're a digital nomad. So that's great.
Right, correct. So I think that's super important because sometimes people hear them and they think it's like interchangeable. So being an expat requires a little bit more work. Like if somebody's like, "Hey, I want to start doing this," that could be like a really overwhelming thing to get into, because you got to do like the paperwork, the visa. Like you maybe you're trying to find a place long term. Like that is something I wouldn't recommend somebody doing right off the bat. I think like once you start doing this, and it doesn't have to be like, "Oh, do it for a year or two," but after maybe a couple months, like start traveling and see it. Or if you already know where you want to go, then do that. But I think those are the differences. So expat is more like you're living in this place. Digital nomad is kind of like you're on like a permanent or temporary vacation, like extended, right? So it's not really that hard. People think it's like all this complex things. Just imagine you take your family on a 7 day vacation, you go on the vacation and you come back. You don't really need to do anything extra. So it's like the same thing, except instead of 7 days, you could stay a month or two or three or four or whatever it is, right? And when it comes to that, you can find an Airbnb, you can find rental properties, you can find whatever, but you're basically staying in a place not to where you have like within like the visa limits. So that's what we're doing, right? However, I'm looking into more of what you're trying to do. So when it comes to setting up the business, if you're in the US, it's not really much anything that you need to do in terms of like being a digital nomad because they would look at it from my knowledge like the same as like if you're on vacation, right? I know like there's some people that are like, well, you're supposed to pay this taxes and that taxes, but it's like they're not really looking that and deep into it at this current time. I know for me, I do have like a what do you call it? Like a not a lawyer, but what's it called? Accountant.
Tax accountant.
Accountant, yeah, accountant. So I think like that's like super helpful because they can like answer your questions about like the laws and the setup and all that type of stuff. But essentially we just set up a LLC in the States. We have like a virtual mailbox in case we ever need to get mail. Or if you have like family, use theirs. And then basically we're just like traveling around to different places, either via Airbnb or sometimes you can find companies that'll let you do like short-term rentals. And then depending on what country you go to, like for Mexico, you can be in Mexico for 6 months as an American. And then once that 6 months is up, you have to leave. But you can like go to another country for like a day or two and come back technically. But in Europe, like you can only be in like certain areas for 90 days out of every 180-day period. So that can get a little bit trickier. There's a to give people some like actual like tactical stuff to implement. There's this website called Nomad List. Have you ever heard of that?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, so Nomad List is cool because if you put in your the trips that you're taking, it'll keep track of like your visa and like the dates that you stayed in each place and all that type of stuff. You can also find like what do you call it? Like meetups and all these types of things. So that's like a really if someone like right now is like, okay, I'm thinking about doing this, I would suggest doing going to Nomad List and it tells you like all the countries, like if they have good Wi-Fi, if it's safe, like what neighborhoods to be in. You can keep track of your visa, like all that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, setting up the business, just set it up like how you normally would, and then you just start traveling.
See, I thought this conversation was going to be very different, but I appreciate where it has gone because I feel like we
For
do
sure.
encourage, especially like people who are younger as well, to get out and explore before you make really like long-term life decisions. Such as getting a 30-year mortgage or things of that nature. If you have the inkling that you want to travel, like there's certain things that you can do, especially like since the pandemic and things like that. A lot of people are now have the option to work from home or to work remotely or whatnot. Being able to take advantage of that, you might have to your sleep schedule might be a little bit off, but you just have so many opportunities even outside and to do the thing that you want to do. Both of us run businesses from abroad and serving US customers or US clients, which I think is dope. If we are going to say somebody who wants to go ahead and live abroad and or try to travel more, even if it's just traveling until they can build up the, you know, encouragement, or will to go and do it for longer than 2 weeks, what would you tell those people?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one directly, but also try to answer in a way that it can apply to some other things. So I think the first thing is like come up with an idea of like what you want to do. And then again, this could be traveling, but also could be business, life, whatever. So for example, all right, you want to travel, that's not a goal because it's like you want to go to Mississippi, you want to go to London, you want to go to France. But if you want to go to France, like what city, like where are you trying to, what are you trying to do? Like if you want to start a business, what type of business? If you like whatever it is, like figure that out. So I think like that's the number one thing. So if you're listening to this, like, and you want to start traveling or whatever it is that you want to do, like come up, like, and don't be scared about it. I think people get all nervous. It's like, who cares? Like if you never do it, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I think you ask people, it's like, where do you want to go? Oh, I'm thinking it's like, why are you being so like be more confident? Like I started telling people like what we were gonna do when we didn't even have the money to do it. Like I didn't really care. I was just like, I wasn't like, I'm thinking about becoming a digital nomad. I'm like next year in February, like I'm being a digital nomad. I think that positive reinforcement is like it opens your mind up to like the opportunities. And when you're confident like that, people start connecting you with people that can make it happen. But if you're like all shaky about it, it's like it's not gonna happen. So it's like figure out like where you want to go. So Hungary, France, like what city? Next thing I would say is or the first or second thing I would say is like write that down like somewhere. So I used to have like a whiteboard where I would write down like it said like Mexico, like February, Mexico, Playa del Carmen, like the date, all that type of stuff. Change like the background in my phone, background on my like just put it in as many places as you can. The next thing I would say is like figure out, don't try to do like the whole thing. Figure out like the first step. People get like super overwhelmed. Like, okay, I want to become a digital nomad. I'm gonna go to, let's say, London. But when I get there, then I gotta figure out how to use the metro. I gotta figure out like where I'm gonna stay. I gotta figure out like where I'm gonna eat. I gotta figure out all these like the neighborhood that I blah, blah, blah. It's like just figure out like the first thing, like commit to London and then figure out the first thing. So again, maybe the first thing is you sign up for Nomad List and you learn about London. Maybe the first thing is you join Facebook groups. Maybe like do whatever it is that you can do. If you have money right now, maybe you buy a plane ticket. But I never do everything at once. Like like when we recently went to Lisbon, Portugal. I bought I think I bought the plane tickets, and then I was like, we want to go, but I didn't have a place to stay yet. But like I knew like I got to commit to this, or I'm like gonna change my mind. Like I'll overthink it. So I think it's like just do something that like gets you a little bit farther down the line. So and then I think the next thing is like don't wait for like the perfect opportunity because like that's not gonna exist. So like you just have to go for it. Like what you were saying, like you had an opportunity, like your life could be totally different. You could have well, I wish that if you would have told me you were going, then I would have went with you. Well, the plane tickets are still available and there's this much money. Yeah, but you know, like I like you're already going, you did it, like people will make up every single excuse. Then you go, and then like I think you said like your teacher was telling you like you should come out here. It's like, yeah, but how am I gonna like I want to have there's like just so many excuses versus like I'm gonna go. You I would imagine you didn't know everything like that you were gonna do out there. There's hella stuff you had to figure out. There's probably a lot of even being out there, like a lot of Americans, well, like, is it safe out here? Is it Muslim? Can I talk to people? How are the men gonna treat me? How do I like? There's so many like questions that you might have, but I obviously don't know the story, but like clearly, like you just decided to just go for it and like you figured it out along the way. So I think like that's the next thing, like figure it out, figure like plan it, come with the idea, start doing the little steps, and like don't wait for the perfect opportunity. Because I think a lot of the times, like the connection happens after you jump, right? It's like the parachute comes out like after you jump, not like before, you know. And so I think a lot of the times for me, once I've done the thing, like once I go, like that's when I have the connections. I was telling someone this story yesterday about like when I went to Istanbul. I was super nervous about it, and because I was like, that was my first time, my second time solo traveling, but I had never. The first time was a couple months prior when I went to London. So I'm like, they speak English, like it's kind of it's a little different, but like they speak somewhat of English, you know. So I'm like, Turkey, I don't know the language. Like people were like, be careful out there, you know, because of the cold. Like they were just saying all these things that made me feel away. And my friend was just like, bro, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna meet the right person. He was like super confident. It was like very weird. I'm like, how are you being so confident for me? Like, how do you know that I'm gonna meet the right person? He's like, bro, you just have like the good energy. Like, just trust me. So the next day, I think it was the next day, I was like, I got on the train to go to the airport, and like nobody is like really sitting around me. Maybe like an older couple, like kind of like in the back, but they have the seats that it's like I'm sitting this way and the person in front is facing me. And then like 5 or 10 minutes later, this guy comes and sits like right in front of me. I'm like, why is this dude sitting in front of me when there's all these other seats? And he's like on the phone and he's talking. I'm like, he's not speaking in English, but I don't know what language it is. So then I wait for him to get done and I hear some I just felt like talk to him, but I'm like, nah, like I'm not nah, like that's weird. Like I don't know this guy. And I just kept feeling it. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna do it. And again, like opportunity, right? Like, you could do it or not do it. So I was like, yo, hey, what's going on? How's your day? And I was like, yo, what language were you just like speaking in? Which is like kind of can be like a random question for someone. And he's like, oh, that's Turkish. And I was like, oh, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Istanbul. I was like, oh, that's where I'm going. Like, I've never been today. And he was like, oh, what flight are you on? So then I was like looking up the number. He's like, oh, I'm on the same flight. And then he's like, I'm from there, blah, blah, blah. I was living in London forever, but like I'm moving back. I'm like actually moving there. So then in the airport, we're like talking to each other the whole time. We get on the flight and we're sitting like next to each other, like on the not like next to each other, but on the same row. So like he's on one
Wow.
side, then you have the aisle, and I'm on the other side. And then once we landed, I went through the whole like line at like immigration, and they're like, I have to buy a visa, but like they don't speak English. So it was like this big thing, and they're like, no, 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 yeah, go over there, go over there, go over there. So then I had to get cash out. I had to pay for it. So then I'm like, how am I gonna get home? Like I don't speak English. I don't speak like I don't know how to like get a taxi. I don't know any of these things. So I go outside, and that guy was like waiting for me like the whole time. And he was like, bro, like we're gonna take you home. Like we want to make sure like you get back safe. And like they took me out to eat, like pay for my dinner, and then like took me home. And so it was just I was telling my friend, I'm like, bro, like that was like the craziest. Like you were literally saying that the day before, and like that happened. And I think that's a good example of like people wouldn't have gone because they would have been nervous. Meanwhile, like that whole time that person was there was gonna be there for you, but like you just didn't know it. And I think if you just live life believing that, like if I make this jump, like the person's gonna be there, this thing is gonna happen. I think 9 times out of 10 it's there because most people are saying no. So God, the universe, whatever you want to say, is like reserving those things for the people that do, which is not that many. So it's like if you're listening to this, think of the whatever goal it is that you have, think of like the steps that you need, do like the whatever you can, and then just believe like you're gonna get the how along the way, not like before.
Mm-hmm. That was everything right there. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And
no doubt.
I definitely have similar experiences when it comes to things like that. You don't know what's on the other side if you don't decide to go to the other side.
Facts.
Listen, Dee, you've been amazing. Can you please tell everybody where they can find you, and how they can get in contact with you, what services that you offer, and things like that? I know our conversation was more on get out the country, figure
Yeah.
something else out, but however they can get in contact with you and also work with you if they need to.
Yeah, if you have any questions about traveling, I'm not like a in the past I had even talked to my wife about creating like a service, but I'm like, this is like it's actually like a lot complicated. Like I don't think I could help someone become like an expat like you because like you have to do a lot of paperwork. It depends on the country, like you got to talk to the government. But if you just have like general questions like what we're talking about, shoot me a message on Instagram and it's D Greene. So at DEE and then green like the color with E at the end. So DEEGREENE. For the service that we provide, like I said, it's a private club where essentially we help online coaches, online entrepreneurs create video content without having to waste time editing themselves, spending time on all these programs. We provide you with an editor. I train the editor, and we also coach them on like how to create the video content. So if you're interested in that, you can either shoot me a DM on Instagram or you can go to my website, which is dgreen.com. Or if you need help with like anything video content related, like my YouTube, I'm putting out like a ton of like tutorials, and you can just the same thing. So D Green.
Listen, folks, thank you so much for joining us today. We talked about a lot of stuff today, so I want you to tap in whatever it is that you want to do, be it stay where you are, start your own business, or you want to travel the world. Make sure that you create those steps and start marking them off. Write them down, cross them out, and get them done. If you know anybody that is a unicorn, I'd love to continue to have this conversation with people. So go ahead and shoot me a DM or leave me a comment. And until next time, we will see you.